to Idea to Impact version 2.1. I got really excited when I came up with that, version 2.1. Let me explain. This is the second season for Idea to Impact, and it's our first session. So I know that's not really super clever, but I'm not very clever, and I got very excited coming up with that one. Idea to Impact version 2.1. I'm glad you came here. We had a great season last year. Let me tell you a little bit about the genesis of Idea to Impact. Last year we were kind of sitting around trying to figure out how do we get the campus engaged in a dialogue about innovation and what its benefits could be to this institution, to our region, and to our state. So we decided to pilot this Idea to Impact program. It's not really a novel title. You know, if you Google it, you'll find it all over the place, but it sounded kind of cool. We adopted it, and so there you go. We're pretty good with that. And we've continued with that. Now, my name is Marty Van Scott, and I'm the Director of the Office of Technology Transfer. And this program really is the genesis of the folks in the Division of Research and Economic Development. You used to know it as Research and Graduate Studies. It's kind of morphed a little bit. And then the staff of the Office of Innovation and Economic Development. So we kind of pulled this program together last year, had great outcomes. At the end of the year, we decided, well, we're an educational institution and we assess what we do. I mean, my office is right next door to IPAR. That's what they do, assessment. So we thought I should go out and ask people, was this a good program last year? We did the surveys, and then I went out and talked to people, and I may have talked to many of you here in the audience today to see, is this a good program and should we continue it? Well, the resounding response was, oh yeah, you should continue it. And some people even offered money. Now that was really cool. I appreciate that. And I'm very appreciative to Mark Phillips with the North Carolina Biotechnology Center, who is not here today, but came and offered money. I didn't even have to ask him the first time. The second time I reminded him that he offered money. So we got that. So we got some momentum going and decided that we should absolutely continue this dialogue this year. And so hence the genesis of Season 2, Version 1. We're changing our program just a little bit for those of you who were here last year. We're shortening the fireside chat just a bit. We're preserving the Q&A. And then I really am excited about this. Is when we're finished with the fireside chat, I'd like you to stay where you are, and we're going to engage in small group dialogues on how to get some of these ideas teased out of your head. We'll go through some exercises. And then come back next time, and we're going to try to advance these exercises and see where they go. So who knows, you might have something crawling around in your head that could be a new business, a new product, a new service, maybe a solution to a problem that you see and no one else has come up with. So I think that's very exciting. So thank you all for being here. I'm very appreciative of our special guests here. We've got a great panel of fireside chat panelists, and I call them my chiefs because they all have somewhere in their title either chief or they seem like they should be chiefs. So let me introduce them. I'm only going to do very brief introductions on who they are and what they do. If you want a little bit more, we've provided a brief bio in your handout material. So our first chief is our provost and chief academic officer, Ron Mitchelson. Welcome, Ron. Ron has a very distinct taste on the culture of innovation here on this campus because he's actually one of our leaders who's leading this promotion here on our campus and what it might do to help transform our region. So welcome, Ron. And Ron is going to be our discussion facilitator, so thank you for doing that with me. Next to Ron, we have our Chief Scientific Officer of Chemistry with a local company, Aerogen, who is focused on, let me make sure I get this right, on advanced forensics solutions. Sounds very important. Something to do with advanced fingerprinting, DNA kind of stuff, heavy duty. But she's our Chief Scientific Officer. Next to, I'm going to skip the next one and go straight to the end and talk about our Chief Innovation Officer, Jeffrey Phillips, because what's a discussion about innovation if we don't have an innovator on the panel? So Jeffrey is the senior consultant and with OVO Innovations, a company located in Raleigh, and they, if I say it right, I hope I got it right, they work with different clients, universities, industry, businesses of all sorts to try to tease out their innovation culture that may have been kind of squashed down over the years. So is that a reasonable summary?
Sounds good.
Close enough. Okay. And then I have the Chief of Chiefs. I thought that was really cool. The Chief of Chiefs. We have here John Harden, who's the Executive Director of the North Carolina Board of Science, Technology, and Innovation within the North Carolina Department of Commerce. So he's our Chief Technology, Science, and Innovation Officer for the state of North Carolina and advises the governor. I thought that was like super cool. So thank you for all for being here. Our format has changed just a little bit. I think I mentioned that earlier. So I think we're in good shape. I just had a few housekeeping things to mention. Was that obviously this is a lunchtime forum, so if you're hungry, you should eat. No one's going to serve you. I just asked that try to avoid stepping in front of the camera because we are filming it. And Q&A. We're going to hold off on Q&A until the discussion is finished. You'll notice on your tables cards and pencils. If the discussion continues and you have questions or you just want to make notes, go ahead and make use of those. And then when it gets close to Q&A time, just raise your hand and one of our staff will come by and pick up the cards and we'll read them off here. So I think that's all I have to say to get started on the idea to impact. Sparking creativity, why is it important? So I'm going to pitch this to Ron. You were a football player, though, not baseball.
I can catch.
Okay, you can catch. I'm going to pitch this to Ron and let our panel get started. Thank you.
Afternoon, everybody. About 40 years ago, I moved to the South as a young assistant professor. Athens, Georgia was the destination. And I can tell you that economic development at that time was portrayed largely by economic developers as the South, a place where you might find industrial parks, open for business, and cheap labor. I'm happy to tell you that things have changed since the South was selling itself as a place of empty buildings and cheap labor. Monday and Tuesday of this week, we visited with 5 consultants who came to Greenville, North Carolina to assess our readiness to attract corporations. And things have changed in 40 years. Greenville can proudly attest as a place of high labor quality, not cheap labor, skilled labor, high quality. And the second thing that our consultants suggested to us is this is a great place in terms of quality of life. So we have a lot of attributes that don't harken back 40 years ago at our disposal. Attracting and retaining industry is still an important part of our strategy as a region, as a city. But there's a new game in town, and I'm glad that there's a new game in town, and it's placed a lot of focus on creativity. It certainly centers on words like innovation and entrepreneurship. It's something that permits us to do a little more homegrown activity than maybe the other strategies would, and I think we're all hopeful for that. And here at ECU, we're certainly interested in assisting our city and our region in attracting and retaining corporations. We're also very interested in starting new corporations. And so, we've got so much going on. I'm so proud of the efforts of my colleagues here at East Carolina University. Whether we're swimming upstream and trying to attract middle schoolers into an advanced manufacturing and innovation academy, or whether we're creating a new Miller's School of Entrepreneurship based on a generous gift, we really are bringing some important ingredients together. Ted Morris has just given me an update on our MakerBot Innovation Center, first in the state, located just a few blocks from here in an urban setting. Creativity. I'm just so excited that the downtown is rapidly developing into the cool kind of place that creative people really want to hang out in. So we've got a lot going, and I'm proud of it, and I'm pleased that East Carolina University is playing a significant role in all of that. And as long as I'm hanging around and have colleagues like you, that'll be maintained. While I'm on this little topic, I can't help myself. There's a bond referendum coming up. Voters, I can do this, by the way. I've okayed it with legal.
I can't do this.
I'm unabashed. You can. I'm unabashed in support for a new building, a building that will shine brightly with new forms of biology and biotechnology that will be open for partnership with regional enterprise. And so on March, whatever it is, I can't tell you to vote yes, but I sure would appreciate your support because it means great educational opportunities and tremendous economic development opportunities in both of those dimensions. There, I've said it. So it's important to us, right? Creativity, entrepreneurship, innovation, just critically important to our university, our city, and our region. John Hardin's been our Chief Technology Officer at the state level for some time now. I've really enjoyed the reports that have come out of John's shop. They really inventory and help us understand where we're at in this important game of technology development. And John, could you give us an overview of where we stand in the state?
I will, and I'll make one comment to kind of put my role in context on this panel. So Ron referenced the game, kind of the economic development game, and so this game is about innovation, and one of the contestants or one of the team players would be Kim. So she's the player. A coach would be Jeffrey, and my role is to be the commentator. And so I'm kind of the talking head that steps back at the 50,000 foot level and says, you know, this team's doing well and that team's not doing as well, or this one should be stronger on the defense and weaker on the offense, and so forth. And so Ron referenced a report that we do, and my office is the Office of Science, Technology, and Innovation in the North Carolina Department of Commerce. And as a commentator, as well as an advisor and a policy advisor and an evaluator, one thing we do is track North Carolina's performance in the innovation economy. And we do that at a macro level. And so we try to measure everything that matters related to innovation in the state of North Carolina and compare North Carolina to other states and, when possible, to other countries as well. And we also zoom down within North Carolina and look at how things play out across North Carolina, because North Carolina is not a single monolithic state. And so we've done this report every couple of years, and we'll be releasing the current version in December. It's called Tracking Innovation, and the report will be called Tracking Innovation 2015. It'll be available on our website, and it has hundreds of charts and graphs and maps and things like that. So what does it say? It says that overall, the state of North Carolina, the overall state, ranks 23rd in the nation when it comes to innovative activity, and that's the whole gamut: the inputs, the R&D, academic R&D, industry R&D. It's things, commercialization indicators like patents and SBIR funding and venture capital funding, company startup rate, all that sort of stuff. And so if you average our score, the state's score across all of those, we rank 23rd, which is probably lower than what a lot of people would expect. But that's because it's the entire state. And if you look within the state, there are pockets of the state that are super strong. So if you took the values of these 39 indicators that we have and measured only the RTP region, we would be top 5 in everything. There are certain portions of the state that if you measured them on these indicators, they would be bottom 5 in everything. This region, the Greenville region, would be probably the second 10 in everything. So it's not top tier, but it's second tier. And there's a lot of potential in this region. And so if you look at the report, you'll see how the state stacks up to other states, and you'll see how this region compares to other regions within the state.
Thank you, John. We're going to give each of our participants a little chance to say a little thing, then we'll get back to some questions, because these statements beg more questions than they answer, obviously. Jeffrey, you have spent a good bit of time interacting with corporations and know a good bit about what they face in this domain of innovation, technology development. Can you comment on the current place of corporations in this very competitive environment they're in?
Sure, glad to. As background, we do consulting work with large corporations around the world, but mostly within the U.S., helping them, as Marty talked about, recapture some of their innovation dynamics. Because at one point, every company was an innovator, and what happens is as they grow, they sort of lose some of that innovation engine, and sometimes it needs to be recaptured through cultural change or through process change. And when we were preparing for the panel, one of the things that we talked a lot about was the increasingly interesting interplay between corporations and universities and other organizations that generate intellectual property. Because what most organizations are really rapidly beginning to understand, especially larger corporations, is that over the last 20 years, they've really focused on efficiency. How do we cut costs? How do we take costs out of the equation? And there's been a no counterbalancing effort on what I would call innovation. And what that's meant is that they are very effective at what they do today, and they're very ineffective at discovering the future. And a new generation of leaders of corporations is emerging that recognizes that this quandary can't continue. For example, if you look at Lafley, who ran P&G prior in years past, he basically made a statement about 10 years ago that said, although we have the largest R&D organization in the consumer packaged goods industry, more of our products and services are going to come from ideas that come from outside the organization than inside. And that spawned the idea of open innovation. And one of the things that I think your university and the universities around North Carolina have a very interesting role to play is this an emerging idea of open innovation. How quickly can you spin up great ideas, great technologies, great intellectual property, and begin the dialogue with corporations who need them desperately? Because most corporations today, while they're really good at marketing and they're really good at execution, they're really poor at generating new ideas or discovering new technology. So there's a really interesting sweet spot that should be occurring very quickly, but what's missing is a marketplace. We don't yet have the full exchange of information and ideas in a true marketplace, because traditionally the corporations have said, we'll do it ourselves, and they don't have links into the universities, I believe, the way they should. And traditionally, and no accusation, just the way I see it from our vantage point, is universities have been more academic in nature and not understood enough about how to convert what they have into objects, and I'll call them objects, intellectual property, whatever you'd like to call it, that corporations can acquire. So once we get to that marriage, and it's going to have to occur because corporations are desperate for good ideas, they're desperate for good intellectual property to accelerate into the marketplace. So there's a really interesting time right now for us of trying to understand how to encapsulate more of this open innovation that you may hear people talk about, and how to address both sides of what should be a burgeoning marketplace. And it isn't quite there yet, but we believe it is going to occur. So that's kind of the way we see it from the corporate side.
Excellent. Thank you, Jeffrey. Kim's in a small technology firm and brings a unique perspective then to our discussion. And she's got some relationships with universities. Kim, can you tell us about your firm and how it relates to universities?
Sure, absolutely. So we're a very small biotech startup company right across from Brody School of Medicine, and we focus primarily on forensics and advancing technology in the forensic field. As part of my group, we focus primarily on fingerprint analysis and looking at drugs and explosives and trying to get more intelligent information from fingerprint residue. And so we've been able to focus on building relationships with the university and integrating with the university, especially with taking on interns, undergraduate interns, and giving them exposure, and working with professors very closely on grants and projects, and definitely expanding into the university group. And that's helped us, in a way, grow in the community and let us become a part of the university and become a part of the community. Because one of the challenges we do find, too, is that with forensics especially, it's a slow market to adapt change. So it's really hard to get into a market that isn't really looking for innovation but needs innovation. And so it's been a little bit of a struggle, too. So we're looking at alternatives with building relationships with the university.
It's tricky business.
It is a tricky business.
No doubt. So, John, it does seem like the rural domain has a bit of a disadvantage in this game. Are there things that rural communities can do? Can they to sort of create the kind of environment, ecosystem, whatever you want to define it, to make sure that we're creative and entrepreneurial and innovative?
Well, thank you for giving me the hardest question of the whole bunch, I think. Well, you referenced an innovation ecosystem, and innovation does occur best and most efficiently and effectively in the right environment, the right ecosystem. And typically, larger cities, more metropolitan areas have a more thriving innovation ecosystem because they have the right mix of assets, whether it's intellectual assets or facilities or legal expertise or finances, things like that. So innovation happens more readily in those areas, but innovation can happen anywhere, rural or urban, but it's more challenging in the rural areas. And what the rural areas need to do is not try to go it alone, to somehow have some sort of linkage to one or more urban areas with which they have an affinity, an economic affinity or ethnic affinity or something like that, so that they are not off on their own. And the two need to figure out what their distinctive competitive advantage is. Not everyone can be super strong in biotechnology. Biotechnology is a hot area. Nanotechnology is hot as well, but not everyone has strengths in that, and not everyone should try to be. And so this region, for example, has distinctive assets that other regions don't, and it should try to maximize those. And third, it needs to be connected literally via the broadband, with broadband access, which is the infrastructure of the 21st century, and be open to open innovation, as Jeffrey mentioned, and be willing to take a risk and embrace risk and challenge yourself.
I think this notion of openness is crucial, right? And certainly something that we've had some initial conversations about, but there's a contrast there. Intellectual property openness. We tend to put fences around our property and things like that. Jeffrey, can you describe what an open system looks like, or maybe what the key ingredients are to make sure that systems are open and as a result more creative?
Well, the traditional definition, if you go back to the late 80s, the idea comes from a guy named Henry Chesbrough, who wrote a book around some of his research called Open Innovation. But the idea is really much more complex and sort of multifaceted. But ultimately what it becomes is, from a corporations, and I'll look at it from a corporate viewpoint, the corporations are just beginning to realize how many more ideas, how much more intellectual property exists outside their four walls. As I said, P&G has 5,000 PhDs, and the CEO's argument is, but there are 7 billion people coming up with great ideas. So how do we harvest that? The challenge from an organizational point of view, and there's several, and you talked about them. One is, have we already discovered this, or are we already doing research so I can protect myself if we see research from someone else? The second one is that, from my perspective, I talked about the marketplace earlier. The challenge with open innovation from a corporate perspective is, where do I go to find that idea? There's so many different places, and unless those individuals or corporations or universities are doing a good job advertising, here's what we have on display. here's what we have, and creating distinctive things. One of the things that John said I think is really interesting, because he and I have had a lot of talk around how North Carolina as a whole can be innovative. And what you don't want to do is say, well, we're all going to be in biotech. Maybe we will, I don't know, but can you create centers of excellence that are really crucial? And then how do you publicize that and draw people to that? Because there are a lot of people in corporations who say, we need ideas. In fact, I was working not that long ago with a medical products company who's in the wound care systems. They're looking to improve wound care. But when they look out amongst all the different universities and research organizations, it's very hard to find who's solving a particular problem in wound care and who actually owns the rights to particular discoveries. And then further, how far along are they? This is another challenge that corporations have. How far along are you with the development, and how much further must we go in order to actually have a viable product? Because there's a big difference between research and a product and then something that consumers can buy. And that's probably one of the biggest challenges, is understanding that roadmap. So you have the marketplace as an issue, you have availability as an issue, and I think a lot of organizations do really good work but don't do a lot of good publicity. So how do I find out what you do? Why is ECU better at something? What are you doing to publicize what you do? And how are you sort of a light? I like to think of it as a lighthouse. We're here with our beam going out saying, this is what we're good at and you should come here. Yeah. And I think that's a big struggle that a lot of corporations have.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great insight. So Kim, if you had your druthers, if you had your preferences, are there things that you'd like greater access to in terms of this small firm based on innovation, creativity, things that you'd like access to that are located here, assets at ECU?
Oh, absolutely. So we're definitely looking forward to building relationships with the university, but I would like to have access to graduate students, and that would be ideal, and to absolutely building up a bigger infrastructure too within the university. So definitely getting involved with
profs and graduate students.
Absolutely.
We have lots of profs and lots of graduate students. I'm sure we can share them.
Oh, yes. And it's been wonderful working with them. I have a strong relationship with the chemistry and physiology department, and definitely building up a lot of good relationships.
I think this is a testimony to something that we're after, right? The engagement of students in all of these difficult processes. They're all difficult. Innovation's difficult, and certainly entrepreneurship. These are difficult processes. And we do want our students at the undergraduate and the graduate level to be engaged in these processes so that they're accustomed to them. I don't know who's going to take this one, but do we ever run into policies and regulations that inhibit what we're trying to do?
So we've been trying to work on a deal with one of the universities, actually in the UK, because we have 2 other sites in the UK, with building relationship as sponsoring a graduate student. And one of the contracts that we're trying to go through with the university has been a bit of a challenge, because they want 100% of the IP. They want us to pay fees and not have exclusive rights. They're going to grant us exclusive rights for only 3 years. So some of the limitations for us is, do we want to invest in this graduate student and let them develop further our IP portfolio when we won't have exclusive rights for 3 years? So some of the challenges with working with universities is getting through the contract phase and developing that relationship where both sides can benefit from the IP process and intellectual property. So.
Well, knowing our university system and ECU, I'm sure we have our own policies that inhibit what we'd like to do in some cases. So, John, do you think anything at the state level?
I'm not an expert on regulation, and my office, I'm proud to say, doesn't regulate anybody. We try to help companies. There is a reason for regulation, though, and regulations can be good in many instances. But the companies that we work with, we often ask them what their biggest challenges are. And while regulations are mentioned, especially in the kind of healthcare, medical care space, they're usually not the first thing that's mentioned. It's usually a lack of capital or a lack of talent or just the resources that they need. And then my office organized an initiative for the governor's office. It was called the Innovation to Jobs Initiative. And it was a way to focus on how can the state help universities commercialize more of their technologies. and we administered a survey to about 1,000 what we call well-informed stakeholders across the state. So it was not the average citizen, but it was university faculty, university staff, investors, business people, entrepreneurs, and said, what are the biggest challenges in commercializing technologies? And again, among those 1,000 people, we had about 600 who replied, gave us detailed replies. Regulations were mentioned, but they were, I'd say, third tier and not the primary. And to the extent that they were mentioned, it was usually university policies and procedures as more than governmental regulations.
Jeffrey, anything at the federal level that comes to mind in terms of the regulatory environment and its impact?
I'm not sure I can speak to the federal level. From a corporate perspective, while corporations will often complain about regulation policies, in this particular environment, what you're talking about is a clash of cultures and business models more than it is an issue of policy or regulation. Mm-hmm. The ideas are out there and they're getting commercialized. It's just not happening fast enough on either side. But that's not because of regulation or policy. It's because you have two different sort of operating models, business models, and ways of thinking that have yet to jive well.
Mm-hmm. And just to add to that, and it's going to sound like I'm not putting any emphasis on regulations, because they do have an impact. But if there were absolutely no regulations on any economic activity, innovation would still be incredibly hard. And so innovation is inherently hard, regulatory climate, irrespective of that. Yeah. And so it's difficult.
I want to respond to that because you guys have said something that I'm going to disagree with.
Okay.
So here's where we're going to blow up the whole panel.
All right.
Good.
Good. That's why we're here.
I did that on purpose.
Innovation is easy.
Okay.
Commercialization is hard.
Yes.
Yeah.
Innovation, generating creativity and generating ideas is easy. We should all be doing that all the time. In fact, everybody's going to solve a problem somewhere today. So what I think of as ideation and innovation, the front innovation is easy if we allow it to happen. It's when we get caught up in all the other things.
I agree.
That commercialization side and then taking it to market, that's the challenging part.
Yep.
So I'd like to make that distinction.
Yeah. Maybe time for one more question. So it's an educational institution. What can we do better as educators to make sure that that our students are these creative, innovative, entrepreneurial individuals that I think that we want them to be? Are there things we could do differently? I already know some things, but
this is a tough one to answer. Also, you ask tough questions, right? Overall, I think there's already a trend happening where the younger generation, they want to be entrepreneurs, they want to be innovators more. They're not as happy working for the man and the corporation, and so that's a natural pattern that's happening. But I think by the time they get to the university, I think a lot of patterns are probably already instilled, and so it may be hard work to counteract those. But this is going to sound trivial, but I think it reflects something, and that is, I teach some at UNC Chapel Hill, and I have never used multiple choice tests. I always try to evaluate students in ways that allow them to express their creativity, still show what they know, but do it in a way that doesn't put them in a box and put them in a category and allows them to think outside of the box. And I think that, writ large, and that doesn't apply to every academic discipline, but that on a large scale does help.
Yeah. I do think, and I've read enough about it, that we as educators, we prize literacy, various forms of literacy, and to a certain extent to the detriment of creativity. And I keep thinking about that. And so I'm sort of pleased when we dip down into middle schools and they're invited to an advanced manufacturing and innovation academy so that they put that front and center. So I'm pleased for that. I guess we'll move to questions from the audience. Is that right, Marty?
We've got questions in the cards. We've got some others. We've got Diana here.
can I add a little bit too quickly on
Absolutely.
on the creativity side too? So when we have our interns come in, we give them very broad ideas on what they want to work towards, and we give them projects that they own, and we let them come up with the solutions, and we let them come up with how to solve this particular broad scope or broad problem. And that really, we've seen some really cool projects and ideas come out of it. So definitely giving the ball to them and letting them become ownership of that project has really helped them take control and get excited, which was awesome to see undergraduates get excited about
Could I
their
add
projects.
just one point to that too? Because one of the things that I think will be most important in an academic setting is to separate the ideas of entrepreneurship and innovation.
Yeah.
Because entrepreneurship, if I open a dry cleaners, I'm an entrepreneur. If I open up a dry cleaners that has a completely new process of dry cleaning that hasn't been seen before, I'm an innovator. So what we need to teach people is entrepreneurship is really important. In fact, it's vital. But it's not always necessarily innovation, and that's not a bad thing. If you want to teach people how to innovate, you have to teach them. Classical education is perfect for that, because what we're trying to do is expand people's minds and teach them a divergent, convergent way of thinking. So I'd like to just separate the ideas of what entrepreneurship is and why it matters and what it is,
Yeah.
and be clear in our language as to what we expect.
Yeah.
If you do that simple thing, and then give kids the opportunity in their academic setting to choose a path, or perhaps even intertwine those paths, then I think that the universities will do a much better job preparing people for the work they need to do.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, and it'll help us shape some of the things that we'll be doing in the future in terms of entrepreneurship and innovation, the distinctiveness. So Marty, do we have some,
Oh, you guys are great with the questions. Your penmanship's not so good, but your questions are good. Let me see. When building an innovation ecosystem, how do you draw the interest of students while maintaining buy-in from faculty? Incentives, perhaps? I'll throw this out there for the whole panel, but Ron, you may want to start.
so how do you entice students while keeping faculty interested? I don't see the duality there, but I mean, it's one and one. I think most of our faculty would entertain creativity as an important part of what they're trying to accomplish. I think owning projects sounds like a pretty enticing thing to me, so I think there are some pretty simple strategies when it comes to educating folks that
I
are
think
alluring.
the challenge, why it may be hard, and I don't know the extent to which it's hard for faculty, but to the extent that it's hard for faculty, that students may want it, but faculty may not as much, is that if you allow students to choose their own project or pursue it, you essentially are giving up control. And that is a hard thing to do. And I used to be a horrible discussion leader in my classes, and I still may not be great, but the reason is because I was scared to let the students discuss, and I would try to control it too much, and it would wind up stifling the conversation. And I found through trial and error that if I eased up some and just let them go, it would sometimes go in directions that I didn't expect, and sometimes we'd go down blind alleys, but more often than not, we would learn something that I didn't know beforehand, and they didn't know either. And so you have to, in a sense, kind of give up a little bit of control to get some advantage.
I think in a traditional university system, there's another challenge when you teach innovation, and that is that, like it or not, to a great extent, university structure is silos around particular academic disciplines. And if you look at innovation, innovation is actually very interdisciplinary. So a good innovation team will often have somebody who understands the technology, someone who understands the market, and someone who understands finance. As a general rule of thumb, if you look at a startup organization, oftentimes those are the first roles you fill. But it's rare that an engineering school, a business school, and a marketing team work together, and that academics is set up as an interdisciplinary program as opposed to siloed programs. So we want to teach marketing or we want to teach finance, but we don't always teach across those disciplines. I think that, if we really want to move into teaching people innovation, we'd start from the ground up and say, all right, we're going to teach a very interdisciplinary way with interdisciplinary teams. Not to say that everyone must be an engineer, everyone must be a marketer, but that you integrate those teams a lot more constantly.
Yeah, we recognize the importance of integration in a lot of different ways, right? Integrate teaching and research and service, integrate across the disciplines. And so we've just started a collaborative. It's called the Regional Transformation Council. And there's a bunch of deans and a bunch of disciplines, but we're going to force the issue, right? That engineers and artists and folks from the business are in the same place.
Well, have you seen what VCU in Virginia is doing with the Da Vinci program?
Yeah.
Where they're multidisciplinary across the art school, the engineering school, and the business school.
Yeah.
It's a very powerful program.
It's those intersections are where it happens. More questions?
We got them. What is a good example, either here or abroad, where the arts and the corporate world are bridging the gap between the two? You might have touched on that just a little bit. Go for it, Kim.
So where the corporations bridging the gap between universities, or?
In the arts.
Oh, in the arts.
In the arts.
Oh, well, that would be great for graphic design, of course, and marketing, going back to the idea of getting it out in the 21st century, and advertising, tweeting, and Facebook, and everything else between the arts. I could see that being really important gap for companies. I don't know if graphic design is all about art, but definitely that's something that could be very useful.
I'm trying to think of the firm that recently announced that it was the ratio that they had been hiring at was like 10 engineers for every graphic artist, and now they're almost going to flip it, right? Or the ratio was something like 5 and 5. You know, that they really did need to up these very visually oriented individuals into that innovative kind of setting that they were trying to create. I guess we have a comment. Can we do that? Sounds legal to me.
Yeah.
Because my area of research is health communication, and I have been trying to get this idea over in our hospital for a while, but at Mayo they started to include music. So they have a piano, and they have musicians from the community come in and play the piano, and they're finding that people are healing faster. You know, that there's not the stigma around going to the hospital because there's music, because it's a more inviting atmosphere and environment. And it wouldn't take that much to do something like that.
Well, I was assuming that therapies would be one place where these intersections really are rich. Yeah.
I think we're finding here in our environment there's a valuable cross pollination, if you will, with the arts in our STEM disciplines, helping people think outside of their box. Next question, it's a tough one. During your foray into the innovation ecosystem, tell us one mistake you have each made.
I've never made a mistake, so I'll leave it.
Maybe not one that you've made, but one that you have seen.
I don't know if this counts as what you're looking for, but I think most of the companies that we deal with underestimate how long it's going to take to commercialize their product, and they overestimate the commercial relevance of their innovation. They've invented the neatest toy out there, and it really is neat. But that doesn't mean they can sell it. They have to be responsive to the market, and I think most they push their technology rather than let the market pull it, and they don't realize how long it's going to take. That's not my mistake, but like Ron, I don't make any mistakes.
So I've made plenty. And I can tell you that every client that we work with, every corporation that we work with, every university that we work with, and every not-for-profit that we've worked with encounters the same innovation hurdle. And go ahead and get your pencils down. I'm going to give you a 7-letter word. That 7-letter word is culture. We have spent so many years, so many decades building corporate organizational cultures that we become attuned to, and those cultures basically onboard people into a way of thinking. And when you introduce any change, they resist. When you introduce a change that's exceptionally risky and unusual and not promising definitive results, they resist completely. So I can tell you that everywhere where we have failed to innovate, either regardless of the kind of client or we've seen clients fail to innovate, it is almost always a signal that the culture wasn't ready, wasn't prepared, or just couldn't change. So I can assure you that when you're talking about innovation, whether at ECU or in the state or in a private enterprise, culture will always be the biggest barrier.
Ask, how do you get past that? Do you keep pounding away at the same thing, or do you change routes?
Depends on the organization you're talking about, but from a corporate setting, what we try to do is, I call it building the plane while it's in the air. So in other words, we're trying to do innovation at the same time we're trying to change the culture. If you try to do innovation without changing the culture, you may be able to force it through, but the culture stays the same. If you try to change the culture without innovating, people begin to ask, where's the results? So in most instances, you need to move forward in both hand in hand, recognizing that culture change is a longer exercise and project innovation is a shorter exercise. How you get to it is a question of how you reward people, how you communicate the importance of things, how you bake innovation into your strategic plans and act on that, and then how you measure it. So much of the good practice around any way you manage an organization is also true in the way you would change the culture around innovation.
I have one more quick question for you. Is it better to start early or let an idea mature? Short question, tricky
I
answer.
think Jeffrey can answer this best, but my answer would be it depends. It depends on what the idea is and what the conditions are in which you are trying to be innovative and take that idea to bring about change. And so I can envision circumstances where having the first mover advantage is clearly the most important thing. But there are others where you want to learn from those who have moved first, wait for an idea to ripen, and strike at that point. So I don't have any specifics, but I do think it really does depend.
Kim, you come from the industry perspective. What are your thoughts? You've been at large and small industry. Really, just you can start early or wait?
It definitely depends on the level of risk too you want to take. So if you're risky and you want to go for it, it might be worth trying, but definitely realizing the consequences too at the same time. So it is a challenge to say it goes back to the market, goes back to commercialization, goes back to the time and the money that you have available or the money you want to get available. So I would say I like the risky idea, but it's definitely individual basis on whether or not you want to move forward with it or not.
So from your experience, is it more risky in the small business startups than you've worked in large established industry partners as well?
Absolutely. Definitely more risky on a smaller startup.
Very good. Well, thank you all for your questions, and I think I'd like to thank our panel for being here today. So let's join me in thanking